because I see him quite often. He has been all over the press since he was ranked the #1 German researcher below 40 in business administration by Wirtschaftswoche. Wirtschaftswoche is, I guess, the most visible publication about German researchers. The result is not surprising. Jan has been named the youngest AIS Fellow, an award that is offered to people who show particular engagement in information systems, in research, in teaching, as well as in service to the discipline. He also ranks internationally among the most published information systems academics of all time. Very impressive. Now, I'm a number person, and I'm always excited and impressed when somebody reaches thresholds. Jan just passed 2 of them. He passed the 10,000 citation mark and an age index of 50. His research is of great relevance. Jan's research explores the intersection of technology, people, and processes. As I read this, I just met the marketing people before. I was surprised. It's TPP. I guess I would have replaced the T by a third P. There's the 3 Ps, but nevertheless, technology people and processes is very impressive. Being a field researcher, he has worked with large organizations such as SAP and Lufthansa, with federal and state governments, but also with startups. He's not only active in publishing papers, but also has a textbook, or several of them, that are being used by more than 500 institutions in over 60 countries. Jan is currently editor-in-chief of communications of the Association of Information Systems, one of the 2 flagship journals of the Global IS Association. And he is AE for the MIS Quarterly, the leading journal in the field. His teaching is highly relevant. At our faculty, he teaches, among other classes, IS development, information systems and environmental sustainability, and IT and entrepreneurship. And the latter ones are of particular importance to us. He decided quite recently to place more emphasis on teaching sustainability and on covering entrepreneurship in our program. And Jan contributes to both areas. He's also an active member of our business school. There he has taken the lead in one of our first certificate courses and has committed substantial of his resources, effort and passion in the program. Economists, anybody here, I don't know, from our econ department, economists call it the public good, doing something good for the benefit of the faculty. And not only the business school. When I needed help for providing public goods, I've always counted on Jan. For instance, a few months ago, we realized that we could not enroll sufficiently many students in one of our programs outside information systems. We lost about 100, a lot of funds. And I tried to find means to recover some of them. One element to compensate for the loss required teaching part of an innovation course on top of the usual teaching load. And I called several colleagues and asked them whether they would take part in the course. They told me, well, we would take part if somebody else would also contribute. This is what economists call the vicious circle, I guess. So it was hard to find this other person, this trigger person, to start another cycle. So I called Jan. He immediately agreed to teach the course, and then others followed. So thanks to Jan, he could compensate about half of the budget deficit in other area by offering a course that is also led by him. So I guess this was enough praise. I think I have raised very high expectations, and now it's up to Jan to deliver. Jan.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. Thank you everyone for coming. It's actually very nice. I feel very nervous, which is kind of sad because I usually don't. It tells you a lot about how much I care about teaching. No, I'm serious. It's very nice to be here. Yeah? Inauguration is normally the start. I'm almost 2 years late. And to be honest with me, it feels more like an arrival and a welcoming rather than a new start. Yeah? So for us, it's sort of the end of a process for me and my wife and my kids of arriving in Cologne, arriving at the faculty, arriving at the university. I'm very happy to be here. We are happy to be in Cologne. We did not know how cool city this is. And I want to take the opportunity to actually talk a little bit about what I do. So Ulrich mentioned it's about technology, process, and people. I've been trying to tell my parents for 30 years or 20 years what it is that I'm doing. I always failed. So maybe this gives a good example. So I learned over the weekend that a lot of people don't know who these people are that I mentioned in the title here. So I'll take you through this. So I thought I'd start with this guy, Leonardo da Vinci, not because he painted the Mona Lisa, which he did, but because also 2019 marks the 500 years that he passed away. So he died in 1519, and he sort of history portrays him as you know, the first and probably most remarkable genius of mankind. He was a painter, he was an artist, but he was also an inventor. So he invented a great many things in the 15th and 16th century, amongst other things, the crossbow, a machine gun, a diving suit, and a humanoid robot. And as you know, or you may know, that 500 years later, they're slowly catching up with some of his visions. And in fact, some universities took the job, and they tried to build to his specifications, to his designs, the things that he invented. Now that we have the materials and some of the technologies. So he's the inventor. That when people talk about inventors, usually that's the name that comes to mind. I want to talk about invention, but I want to tell you a different story. This is a car that people call the Heckler. The Heckler is a car that's been developed for fun driving. It looks a little bit like a Mattel car, you know, one of these little matchbox cars that drives around, where you go in for fun. And the interesting thing about this is, this car was not invented by humans. In fact, this is a car that no human could ever build or could have ever invented. So there's no Da Vinci standing behind this. So I want to tell you a little bit about this story, because this is one of the cases that we're actually studying at the moment, the Heckler car, which is a car that exists, that it's out there, that it can drive, that wasn't designed, invented, or even built by humans. So how was it built? Who invented the Heckler? First of all, a thing that's called the generative design engine. The generative design engine is basically a piece of software that you give a little bit what you expect as an output. Say, I want something to sit on. And you tell them a few constraints, like it needs to carry 80 kilograms of weight, maybe a little bit more, yeah? And the generative design, and then by itself, generates a design that meets these criteria. So this example of the chair is not that I just made up. This is actually one of these generated, a chair that was generated by an algorithm. Yeah? So you tell them, I want something to sit on, it needs to fulfill certain constraints, and you go and tell me what the design should be. And the design of the Heckler is the same thing. So they said, we wanted a car, the car should go very, very, very fast, and it should obviously be safe. Click on a button, tell me what such a car with a chassis could look like. Then the next thing is, they didn't build the car either. They basically used a very fancy 3D printer. So they took the design output that the program, that the software built, and submitted it to a 3D printer, not the one that you can buy at Aldi, one that can print 3D, that print titanium alloys, a little bit more robust. But still, this is what it looked like. Yeah. So the third part that they did is, they didn't even drive the car. Yeah, so they basically had a 3D version of that thing, put it into virtual world reality, so a software program that mimics the real world but isn't the real world, and drove around there. So one of the things, for example, is they simulated a wind tunnel, because the guys that were interested in the Heckler didn't have a wind tunnel at their disposal. So they simulated the sort of forces and the sort of airspeed, etc., and so forth, and simulated how the car would go at very, very high speeds. And only after all of this was done, they basically pushed the button and the car was built. Yeah, and you might wonder now, that, okay, this is great, this is very cool product invention, where are the people? Yeah. So I'm telling the story a little bit as if a computer, a robot sort of designed all this. Of course there were humans involved. But let's have a close look at what they did here. They doodled on a piece of paper. This is a sketch that they made. They drove a regular car, some car, in the Mojave Desert, or some desert in the US, and they put some biosensors and force load sensors on their bodies and on that regular car, drove at the highest speed they could find to generate data that the design engine and the virtual reality and the simulation engine could use. And the third thing they did is they played a video game. Yeah, so to test drive that car, they took a 3D computer version of that car and then did one of the regular motorcycling car video games that you can have. So so that by the time the car actually hit the road, it had over 1 million miles of test driving in it, just not in the real world. And of course, what they're doing at the moment is they're running around trying to sell the car. Yeah, so they go to the EIR and some other of these big automotive conferences and sell the car. The funny thing is, this is Mickey McManus. This is one of the guys that works around this, and this is Mouse McCoy. Mouse McCoy is a stunt man, and this guy worked for Mattel for a while. And Mickey Mouse built the car, Mickey Mouse. But they're not designers. They never worked in the automotive sector. They never worked in industrial manufacturing. Just a bunch of geeks and nerds, and this guy stuntman. They wanted to build really cool cars. They relied on a whole lot of digital products to help them invent and eventually build such a car. And this is sort of the modus of my lecture. What I want to talk about is how these digital technologies think or make us rethink what we know about inventions and innovation, how these things come into being. Yeah? Technologies fundamentally change how we think about innovation and invention. Yeah? Think about it. This is a car, an industrial scale car. It weighs several hundred kilos. Yeah, it's a very complex object to build it. I read once that a Ford car is about 150,000 individual parts that need to come together. And essentially a whole bunch of algorithms and other digital products, like a printer, simulation, virtual reality environment, a generative design algorithm, allow them to create a car without any big knowledge in that domain or in these processes before. Of course, and this is the big move, right? The idea that digital technologies help us with innovation isn't necessarily new. For example, we've seen this in what we call digital native companies and digital native products. Video games, for example. Yeah? Video games have always existed only in the digital space. Yeah? There's no physical product anymore. There's no physical material that you need to glue together, staple a screw. They operate entirely in the software out in the cloud on the internet. And here in these companies, they've been doing digitally driven innovation for a much, much longer time. So, for example, my friend Stefan over here, he's been studying Ubisoft, and now we're doing this together. Ubisoft, which is a leading video game publisher, sits in France and in Paris, amongst others, and they've been using so-called procedural generation engines that help them to build, design video games. And this is an example of a game called Ghost Recon Wildland. Basically, the idea is called an open world, so it's a massive landscape, and you can wander around freely with a little video game character. So what that means is that you have to design every facet, every accent of the mountains, of the landscapes, of the roads, of rivers, and everything else you have in such an environment. And they're using software engines that design these things for them. You don't have to design manually every pixel of this. Yeah? So they've been using digital products to automate some of the invention already in an entirely digital space. It's already impressive. But what we see now is that some of these ideas from companies that operate only in the digital world are taking over part of the digital world. For example, pizza. Yeah? When I prepared for this talk, I read up a little bit on Hawaiian pizza. Can you show of hands who likes Hawaiian pizza and who hates it? Who likes it? 30, 40% who hates it. So the funny thing is, this splits the world. Yeah, this is a matter of global interest and security. Yeah? So Australians rank Hawaiian pizza as the #1 pizza. Yeah, by far in the US. Pineapple on the pizza is one of the top 3 worst toppings ever, next to anchovies and mushrooms, by the way. Yeah. So it's so far that the president of Iceland in 2017, he made a very famous statement saying like he would pass a law to ban pineapple from pizza, and it caused a whole lot of politicians. Justin Trudeau commented on it, and the Italian Pizza Inspectorate. The Italian Pizza Inspectorate is an actually government body that controls and regulates what you put on a pizza. So this is serious business, yeah? And of course this is a human invention. What we see now are computer-generated pizza toppings. Yeah? A bunch of guys at MIT in a project which is really interesting, www, how to generate almost anything. They created pizza dishes entirely crafted through an algorithm that looks at, well, which flavors might go well together. Yeah, blueberry, spinach, and feta, or my personal favorite, shrimp jam and Italian sausage. They do this for everything. This is pizza, and I went through the news. They do this for perfumes. They've been doing this for music, where they had a pianist, someone on the piano playing next to an algorithm composing a song in tandem together. In fact, the only thing they don't generate are the names of the pizzas. Yeah, like not sure, Familia Rocks pizza or Pizza Brexit maybe. Yeah. So a digitally produced pizza. So what we see here is basically 3 steps of digitizing products that used to be human inventions, quite physical. Yeah? A very simple way of doing this is a conversion. Yeah? You take a physical object and turn it into a digital object. Now, I'll give you an example in a minute of what that looks like. The other version of that is you do augmentation, or what I call augmentations. You take a physical product and you wrap it with digital features, or features that can operate in the digital world, and gives you some of the capabilities of a piece of software. Yeah, think of a toothbrush with a sensor that becomes a smart toothbrush, so to speak. Yeah. Or the third version is digital infusion, where you really take a physical object and you infuse it with digital capabilities that really bring meaning and identity to this product. Let me give you 3 examples. This is digital conversion. We take a physical product and we convert it into a digital version. When you're as old as me, I'm apparently 40 as you just learned. We use the boarding passes at an airport. Yeah, that's what we use for traveling with airplanes. And now obviously we have digital boarding passes that operate on your laptop, on your mobile phone maybe even. Right, so on Saturday I came back from Umeå in Sweden. Flight was delayed and I had to do a whole lot of rechecking and rerouting and rebooking. I never had a piece of paper in my hand. Yeah, so I literally wandered through the different airports that I had to travel through, and every now and then I got a text message or an email or something like this and said, "Is it a boarding pass?" Yeah, what used to be a physical object is now a digital object, and as you can tell from this story, it infuses them with certain capabilities, like it can change. In the good old days, if I had to rebook, I had to go to the service counter, wait for my boarding pass, place it there, then they print out a new one, and that's my new seat assignment, my new flight. Now I get an email update that automatically changes the flight number, my seat, or whatever it may be. So things can look different. Digital augmentation, I said, these are physical products that I'm kind of adding, where I'm adding a few digital features. Yeah? Thermomix in Wuppertal, that's a good example. It's basically a cooking machine, but it gets a few digital capabilities, for example, with the fact that it can download recipes over the internet and give you instructions. This here on the right-hand side is a case that we're actually studying. We don't work with Thermomix, but we work with Lockitron. Lockitron is a provider and they're building smart door lock solution. But to build a smart door lock solution, you actually have to take a physical door lock and add a few things that enable you to do things in the digital world. And you need a Bluetooth adapter, you need to connect to the internet somehow, you need to write a piece of software that can speak to this thing, so to speak. Yeah. And the digital infusion example, this is the sort of latest generation of digitalization that we see. For example, where we have cars like Tesla cars that you can update through software and it takes on new meaning. Yeah? So you may know that the current generation of Tesla cars, if you're rich enough to have one, they're manually driven at the moment, but if through a software update, they already have the capability of driving themselves. And imagine what that does to the meaning of driving a car, when all of a sudden from tomorrow onwards, you don't call the shots anymore, and you don't even make the decision whether to stop at Revo and Edeka anymore, but the algorithm decides it. Yeah? So what do we see here? What we see here, let me take you one step further just to show you how radical this idea is. So when you look at cars, for a long time, one of the worst things that could happen to a car producer is that if you have to recall cars. And there's plenty of these examples where you have to launch a recall, which means you physically have to track down all the cars that are out there, they have some fault, you have to bring them back into the workshop, and fix something. And let's say you're Volkswagen and people found out and they busted you on the diesel thing, and then now they're trying to avoid having that recall where they have to bring everyone back and remanufacture part of that diesel engine. Yeah, so that happens to many car producers. This is an example from Ford. And of course Tesla has the same thing. Yeah? Tesla had issues and they had to recall a particular model, the Model S, which is one of the cars that they had built. But the big difference is, that they said, hang on a second, we do have a recall. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to bring in your car. We don't physically recall any cars here. We'll just, play in another software update overnight while you sleep, when the car is fixed. Yeah. So what we see here is that we bring certain characteristics and capabilities that we know in the digital world, and we bring them to very physical, concrete products. Yeah? And that's what happens on these three levels when you convert products, you augment them, or you even infuse them. Yeah? And there's a lot of research on what actually happens there. And I'll give you a couple of examples here. So for example, they say what academically use funny words, what we call which means they can change. The Tesla car, we can change what the car does and how it does things through a software update. Yeah, the Thermomix can do that as well. The smart toothbrush, if it's really smart and connected, it can do this as well. Why? Because they're self-referential. We can address them. They become objects that we can talk to, or even that can talk to one another. Yeah? The other thing that happens is what I call footprinting, which means because they add some physical characteristics, they also leave data. Lots and lots and lots of data. Yeah? When you're on Facebook and you do certain things, you do know that you leave data. You know, when you browse around on Amazon, you do know that you leave data on Amazon that they use for analysis, for prediction, to make recommendations, and so forth. Obviously, every digital object leaves a lot of data. Everything that it does leaves a footprint, a trace somewhere that becomes available. They can do this. Yeah? So the third thing in the middle, independent agency, means they have the ability of doing something on their own. At the moment, this is a big deal in the press when you read about robots, artificial intelligence, and so forth. I don't want to get too deep into whether or not artificial intelligence is really intelligent, but it's really that they can do stuff. They can do some things by themselves. The smart door lock is a piece of software that can unlock doors. Yeah? The Thermomix is a thing that can actually cook a little bit. Not very well, but better than most. Yeah? And why is this a big deal now? Well, one of the reasons it's a big deal nowadays is that it's happening on a completely unprecedented scale. This is a graph that shows the evolution of the world population. Yeah, so we're sitting somewhere here, a bit over 7 billion people, and that's the information. This is a graph that shows the number of digital connected objects. So things like a smartphone, like a door lock, like a Thermomix, that are on the planet, connected and can speak to one another over the internet and other things. And as you can see, since 2009 we have more things than people on the planet. And these days we have about 30 billion connected objects at the moment. I should say that we have about 200 billion electronic or digital objects, 30 billion of which they talk to one another. And these 200 billion objects feed off 50 billion sensors. So sensors are little things that track and collect and store data somewhere, yeah? Smart sensors, and these sorts of things. So we have much, much more of these objects around than we ever had before, and importantly also more than people. At the same time, we also are building quite a lot in artificial intelligence. So not only do we have more technology, more digital objects flying around, and they are more and more connected on an unprecedented scale, they also get smarter. If you put these two things together, smarter things, and more of them, and more data, and they can talk to one another. This is why we have a lot of unprecedented digital realm that can actually do a lot of things that were not thought possible before. So, which is why I want to go back to this idea of what does that have to do with innovation and invention. I want to show you a little bit about how that has been changing invention and innovation processes. Yeah, like the 500 years that passed between Da Vinci sketching his ideas for a machine gun and the Heckler that was being built. Go to the second person, Thomas Alva Edison, which apparently a lot of people also didn't know who that was. Thomas Alva Edison is actually still the most productive inventor in human history. He has about 1,000 patents in his name, and you probably all know him because he invented the light bulb. And he also claims to have invented the telephone. Although that's disputed and other things. So the image that we have of Edison and of Da Vinci and some of these other inventors is some genius old white male, of course. Some genius guy sits in his lab, lots of equipment, plays around until he crafts a new innovation, a new innovative object that then goes out and masters the world. And this is obviously a regime we still see. For example, my wife and I were in Duisburg a couple of weeks ago at ThyssenKrupp on a campus tour. And they showed us one building where they said they have 800 scientists working in the R&D, the research and development lab at ThyssenKrupp, a big steel manufacturer in a rural area. Just a useful. Yeah, it has 90 R&D locations worldwide. Just for comparison, Cologne has 500 professors, 70 women. That's not the point right now. But, yeah, so this is massive scale, but it's the same model. They take a building, put a bunch of smart guys into this, and say, you guys, here's a lab, here's equipment, you guys go and invent stuff. Yeah? The regime that we call it is basically known as what we call a stage gate model. The stage gate model is basically a model where you say like, well, you have an idea, you see where that works. And you build a prototype of it, you see where that works. And you build a bigger, better version of it, you see where that works. And at any one point in time, there's a gate, and you can stop that inventing process when you find out what doesn't work. Yeah? Guy in a lab, Edison, Einstein, Vinci, all these other guys, or even the guys that just improved, sitting there inventing stuff, seeing whether it works and moving on. Of course, that's not the only way to do invention or innovation. NASA, for example, they had the problem that they need medical kits on their manned spacecraft, yeah, and they have no idea what they need. Because they go to areas where no human has ever been before, they travel for as long, they try and predict a lot of very unlikely and likely scenarios that everything can happen in outer space. So to solve that challenge, to determine the optical content of medical kit, they said, we can't solve this ourselves, let's put this out there, and we asked, in this case, Harvard Business School, and a company called CocaCola, and said, hey guys, can you help us solve this problem for us? So they did a process that people call open innovation. They gave data and they gave the problem out to the world, and the world responded and had submissions. Yeah, so the guys from CocaCola, they had around 23,000 people all over the world submitting ideas for an algorithm that could help NASA solve that problem of what should be in my medical bag in my space shuttle when the next time I launch. Yeah, by the way, the price for this was $25,000. And a front-side seat at Cape Canaveral, so you can watch the space shuttle go into orbit. This is a regime we call open innovation. Yeah? So very different from the ThyssenKrupp example, or even from Edison, where you sit in a room, or you sit in a building, or you're within a corporate setting, and you work on the ideas. To actually let ideas come in from the outside. So you either go out with the problems, you go out with the data, or you go out with everything else, and you go selectively to outside of the organization and say, hey guys, you come in and help us solve this problem. Yeah? So in other words, you reach out to people outside of the organization. But there's even different ways. This is an example. I was still in Australia. We talked to CocaCola for a while, and at that time, this is about 12 years ago, they came up with a vending machine that basically allowed people to mix their own type of Coca-Cola products. So it was a big vending machine with lots of buttons, and behind every button was basically a capsule of the particular brand of flavor that you wanted to. So if you wanted to have a Sprite Fanta Coca with a little hint of strawberry, you pressure on this button and out comes the drink that you wanted. Yeah, so basically, you tell the customers, you tell me yourself what the product is that you want. Any guesses what happened to that, by the way? So, everyone tried the Fanta Sprite Cola strawberry mix, found out it's fairly disgusting, and then went back to pressing just Coca-Cola or Zero, if that's your thing, and then, so they stopped the entire initiative because it didn't really give them great new product ideas because everybody wanted the brand and the product that they knew, yeah? But the idea was interesting. And we see this somewhere else as well. Yeah, Starbucks did the same thing. They called it My Starbucks Idea, and they said, you tell us what sort of vanilla-flavored latte you would want, and what sort of bagel and cookie, etc. you want. You tell us what you want, and Starbucks builds it. That's how they use the web page for this. This is one of the famous examples. Even more famous example is actually Lego. Lego, the Danish company. The interesting thing about this is they also said, you tell us what the Lego product is that you want, and we'll build it and sell it for you. The interesting thing with Lego is they have received all these ideas for the product even though they didn't have. So over the last 50 or so years, Lego nerds had been submitting their product ideas to Lego anyway, whether they wanted it or not. And at some stage, you got so many of them in the late 90s, they said, oh, Jesus Christ, may as well make money with it, given that you send us all these letters and so forth. Anyway, so this is a famous example. Some nerd built the Back to the Future DeLorean, yeah, and even the little figures, and in fact, you can buy it. Yeah. Another famous example is someone built the Star Wars Star Destroyer, big space shuttle thing. And you can buy that too for 800 euros underneath. I wanted it for my birthday to get, you get the idea. So usually buy now, you don't even have to build these products with your own Lego bricks and everything. You can do this entirely in a virtual space. So they created an online platform where you can virtually build Lego products. And if they like it, they basically, craft the box, put all the bricks in it, the bricks in it, print out the schema and the plan, and send it over. You can buy it. This regime is what people call crowd innovation. So recall we had stage gate in an organization, whether you're big, like CocaCola, or small, like Edison, sit in a room with a lab, play around with your ideas, and you go through the different stage gates. Or you do open innovation, where you selectively open the boundaries of your organization, you open the door a little bit to others, and let them help you innovate. Crowd-based innovation is basically you take the boundaries and you make them open wherever you can. You let ideas from the outside come in, you give problems to the outside world. Sometimes you can even open up the design process. Yeah, like IKEA, they don't assemble the product for you, you have to do it yourself. Yeah, so these are all crowd innovation products. Now if you put them all together, you get an interesting timeline. Yeah, from your R&D department as the innovation source, to your vendor suppliers, your corporate partner as the innovation source, to the crowd, to users and customers as the innovation source. So what you're doing, you're gradually opening this up. Yeah? So invention is not anymore the function of a mastermind who's brilliant and ingenious. It's sort of selectively open and bring other people in. Yeah, of course, you see also other types of processes. So from a stage gate to an open innovation to a crowdsourcing model. What that means essentially is you have to make this work on different levels. And to give you one example, when Starbucks launched its StarbucksIdea.com page, they got about 150,000 ideas within a couple of weeks. Sounds like a lot, right? And then they said, oh my God, what do we do with 150,000 ideas? We promised every single person feedback. And so they had to hire staff to read all these ideas and get back to the people who submitted them and said, thank you very much, this is a great idea, we're not going to do it, or we will going to do it. So they had to invent all sorts of new processes of how to deal with all these ideas that they had generated. And they weren't prepared for this. Yeah? So what we see now, what we see with the Heckler, is entirely new regime. Yeah? So where we have from custom vendors, suppliers to the crowd, we now involve digital technologies, digital objects, digital products. And with this, we need an entire new set of processes and capabilities. And this is the stage that has been launched by some of the digital native companies, like the video game producers I showed you, or the Heckler example, or even the guys at MIT that built that computer-generated pizza. Yeah? They're changing the processes and the sources of the ideas and the process of how to handle them. What we also see a little bit here is, what we see is a shift from basically a very human-driven process to a very digital-driven process. Yeah? So you saw that in the open innovation space, people already made use of web infrastructures. Most of the crowd-based innovation ideas make heavy use of the web and sort of technological infrastructure. They need some place to be able to handle 150,000 ideas, to filter them, to assess them, to build them, and so forth. Yeah, like Lego, who had an entirely virtual product design platform that everyone can use. Here, of course, we're entirely or mostly digital driven. Yeah, where I showed you the example that the Heckler people, they doodled around, they just drove the car, and they run around selling the car, but the influence is a lot less. Yeah? And this is the stage where we're at, and this is one of the fascinating things of modern time of 2019, where they like, how is this trajectory, as we move more towards the right, how do we handle this? Yeah, what happens to the people? How do the processes change? And of course also, what's the outcome of all this? Yeah? What sort of inventions are we going to generate this way? So let me talk a little bit about implications here. One of the obvious implications is you move toward the right and become more and more digital driven in your innovation processes, scale and speed go up tremendously. Yeah? So when I said in the beginning, CocaCola has 800 people, you could say that University of Cologne, 500 professors thinking about innovative stuff, more or less all the time. That sounds like an impressive number. Edison, 1,000 a bit patents over his lifetime, that's an impressive number. Yeah, my StarbucksIdea.com generated 150,000 ideas in a couple of weeks. Yeah, Lego has millions of users submitting ideas. So the scale skyrockets. Yeah? As you move on, not only the scale skyrockets, but also the speed, of course. What took Edison for 1,000 patients his entire life takes probably 800 scientists in ThyssenKrupp a little bit less. Takes Starbucks a couple of weeks. It took the Hecklers a couple of days to figure out how the design works. In fact, probably a couple of minutes, depending on how powerful their computer was. Yeah? So scale and speed change very rapidly. And if you think about what do you need to be able to be good at to be an inventor anymore, what it also happens as you move towards the right, towards digital-driven innovation is you need to be able to deal with data. Yeah, so this is where this entire conversation that we see in the press, and of course also in the academic discourse about big data, data analytics, data sciences, and so forth, where they come up, and which is why, by the way, that Ulrich decided we're going to have a data analytics course in our faculty as well. And we need to have people that are able to deal with these amounts of data that are being generated as we have more objects and people on the web that we can handle many, many more ideas, solutions, problems, variables, at a much unprecedented scale. Yeah? So data scientist, Thomas Davenport from Babson in Boston, he called it out probably 10 years ago and said, like, look, watch out people, this is going to be the sexiest job of the 21st century. We need people that are able to do this sort of stuff. Yeah, this is not just math, but math and big numbers if you want. So scale and speed, different requirements that we have. Yeah? If you think about the Heckler example that I gave in the beginning, I said, but these guys were not car manufacturers. They were not industrial manufacturers, they were not designers. One of them was a stunt driver, and the other guy worked for a toy company, for Mattel. And they built a car. Now, I've never built a car myself. I mean, I tried as a kid and failed, but nothing like this, right? So we have people that have mastered some of the data, and some of the digital tools that you have at your disposal these days. That's all it takes to be a fairly good inventor. And in fact, if you talk to Mickey McManus, he said that's the entire point of the Heckler. He said that everyday person with everyday capabilities, with the digital tools at their disposal, you can build stuff like this. So I wasn't involved in this, but there's also a study on regular 3D printers, the type of 3D printers you can buy at Aldi for a couple of €100. How that spawned entire businesses that sell stupid stuff like whistles for referees of soccer games. Yeah, you can 3D print a whistle, so if you ever need a whistle, you just press a button and have it yourself. Yeah, and design and all of that becomes much easier at your own fingertips. Of course, the question then becomes, well, are these inventions that are more data-driven, faster, and more, larger, so to speak, in volume, are they better? Yeah, are they more creative? And again, I'm piggybacking here on Stefan, who uses this example. This is a game, a video game again. This is called No Man's Sky. It's a video game that's entirely created by now. Yeah? So software wrote this video game. It looks pretty impressive, nice visual graphics. So what happens there is you're in a galaxy, in a spacecraft, and you land on certain planets, have to find stuff and move on to the next planet. Yeah? And infinitively created games. You can play it forever if you want it. Now the interesting thing is what happens when you look at reviews. Yeah, run away and save your money. This is an unholy mess for $50. User score of 2.5. That's very low, or a 61 Metascore. So this game essentially is incredibly boring. Yeah. So it's a automatically created, procedurally generated game, an invention that lacks ingenuity, that lacks creativity, that lacks that sort of human spark. Right. So what comes out of this, and this is sort of a tipping point where we are at the moment, is that we have to figure out where exactly that sweet spot is between some of the advantages that you get from digitally driven innovation and some of the advantages that you may still have from human-driven innovation. Yeah? So scale and speed, that could go up perhaps. Maybe even efficacy of that process. So with efficacy, I mean like more value for money, so to speak. But maybe you sacrifice on creativity and ingenuity. And you see that I put a lot of questions out there because I frankly don't know. And I'd like to say that no one else does either. So we are at this moment in time where we have capabilities of having examples and stories like No Man's Sky, the Heckler, and the computer-generated pizza, who are fairly fascinating case examples, but we will obviously have to wait and see where exactly that sweet spot is. It's probably not a curve that's going to tip over entirely to the right-hand side, but we know also a lot of examples where we're relying only on human-driven innovations, like Edison and Da Vinci in their labs, it's also not going to solve the world's biggest problems either. You know? So what that all means, and now I'm coming to the end here, is these types of innovation and invention, as they are becoming digitalized, are fundamentally social-technical. Well, that's another academic term, but what we mean by this is something that happens when technology, people, and even organizations come together. And that's sort of what we're doing, or what I'm doing in my research and my teaching. That's the sort of stuff that interests me. The intersection where these three things meet. Yeah? Inventors, maybe in organizations, as the collateral with technology and how certain processes then change. And in this particular case, inventions and innovation processes. Yeah, and we've been studying this over recent years. I couldn't help it, but I had to put it in some of the papers. We've been studying this a lot. Yeah? So we had a look at how companies that were very, very good at inventing. The entire DNA was built around innovation and inventions, how they failed at doing open innovation. How they failed in using a technology platform to help them do this. We're also studying how digital products are being conceived, being put in the markets, and then all of a sudden change. Yeah? We're studying how some of the native companies like Ubisoft, how they're changing their video games when they're out in the market because they can. Yeah? So all these things come together, and they're all placed at that intersection between we have technologies that are here to stay, and they're getting more and more agency, more and more capabilities. They're meeting more and more the physical products, from a good old water bottle to my toothbrush to cars, buildings, and these days even cities. Yeah? And what happens then? What happens to the role of the human then? Yeah? So I just wanted to, because this is an inauguration, I want to tell you a little bit what it is, what we're doing. These sorts of intersections that basically place the foundation, the glue, so to speak, for the different research projects that we're doing. For example, we're studying so-called digital entrepreneurs. So people that bring startups into the market that have digital products. I mentioned Lockytron, the smart door solution, and a few other ones that we're studying. We've seen like they're building these products that are part of the physical nature and part of the digital nature. Yeah, so they're building these things and they're bringing them out to the market and trying to sustain them. We're also studying what big companies or what companies are doing to try to keep up with this. Yeah, I mentioned ThyssenKrupp, and I mentioned I'm giving this talk and basically saying, hey guys, your 800 sizes in the lab, this is all very nice, but I think you're missing out on a lot of innovation capability here. You should do open innovation, crowd-based innovation, and so forth. So how do companies change the way that they run the processes? We're also having a look at some of these innovative ideas, how these technologies can help us building a more sustainable future. I'm a little bit more cautious here, but so sort of can we do something to help Greta, so to speak, in her endeavor? So this is the sort of areas that we are researching. They're all placed at the intersection. Yeah? So we have certain processes that people have in place. The humans had a particular role that they always took the ground, and now come technologies and these things change. Whatever comes out of this is fairly uncertain at this stage. And we also do this. Ulrich mentioned this a little bit. One of the things that we're doing, or one of the implications that come out of this change that I've just tried to explain to you is that if you're an aspiring or a manager in a company where they run things a particular way, the way they do things around there, you need to change that as well. You need to build the new capabilities for the new management elite. Yeah? So we build a course that we call Leading Digital Innovation. So how do you lead in times where some of these changes occur? Yeah. The funny thing is, we teach that here in that building over there, in a library that's probably 100 years old, and it looks like that. Yeah? So we're talking about digital innovation in a space where books are that haven't been touched for like 100 years or so. So it's a nice little contrast. So what I told these guys is go around and we try to find the oldest book in the shelves while we talk about how AI is changing the way that all cars drive. Yeah? So we do this together with the University of Rotterdam and leading the next generation of executives and trying to bring them some of these capabilities. And we also go, of course, into our own students. Yeah? So as I mentioned, we talk about people, technology, and organization. Sometimes that means you can't teach that stuff in a room like this. Yeah? So one of the things we are doing is when we teach entrepreneurship, we go out to the places where entrepreneurs meet. Like this is a startup space in Cologne, where obviously things look a little bit different. You have a foosball table, you can't really see it, it's over here. There's a beer fridge stacked with beers all the time, and we bring our capabilities there, and we bring people in and say like, this, I'm going to tell you about technology, I'm going to tell you about the sector, you guys go and figure it out. Yeah? And ideally, you bring out solutions that help you to actually become an entrepreneur. And a third example I wanted to give is a lecture we're trialing as of next week. We call it, it's a horrible title, it's called System Engineering for Digital Innovation. What it means is, we bring a bunch of digital products in, hardware, so to speak, a bunch of technologies, give people a budget. We give them a big sustainable development challenge. Fresh water, gender inequality, clean oceans, what have you. You pick a problem, we'll give you hardware, and you try to connect these two things. So the task to the students will be is to actually build digital innovations that into a product that helps some of these big challenges that Recker runs around and tries to tell and educate the entire world about, that helps some of them at least a little bit. We were hoping for 6 students, we got 27, which means we need more money to actually be able to fund this, but we'll figure it out. And this starts next week. And as you think about it, some of you may have been at university a long time ago. That's a fairly big difference to how you used to run teaching. There's no exam. So we'll judge the students based on the merits of the products that they develop. So there's no theory here, for that matter. I have no idea how to build these things. So I also have no idea what such a solution could look like. So we'll have to figure it out together. So even the teaching about digital innovation or digital invention looks a little bit different. I've been trying to do this year ever since I started, and so far, at least there's interest. We'll come back next year and tell you how effective that was. And that brings me actually to the end. As usual, I'm a much faster talker than I thought. That's it. I hope that gave you a little bit of an insight into my thinking and the sort of work I've been doing over the last couple of years, what I'm planning to do over the next couple of years. Do stay in touch. We are also digitally reachable. It's actually a big thing these days for academics to actually be a little bit more present on some of the channels that younger people use these days. Thank you very much. We have ample time for questions or comments. I do appreciate you all coming here. You know there will be food and drinks after we finish here. I'm very happy. I'm very sweaty now. So thank you very much. Any questions or comments? While we're here. Yes, please.
When we look at digital services and old-style products, so let me pick up the example of the Tesla. There's on the one hand, there's the car, pretty old engineering stuff, and on the other hand, there's this very modern user interface. What's your opinion on the sustainability of digital businesses just based on digital products with respect to the capacity on spend on the market for a long time?
So you mean like an economic sustainability? It's an interesting one. I think at the moment it's an interesting one in the automotive sector, in particular in Germany, because now we see the big heavy hitters and Mercedes and BMW and Ford entering the space that Tesla has been occupying for a couple of years. And I personally, this is just my opinion, I think they're gonna kick some ass, so to speak. I think they have, because the industrial manufacturing side has been at the prime for many long time, so they have a lot of process capabilities really well under control. I think that will help them in the digital space as well. I haven't really talked about this, but as you're in a company that has been operating completely physical space, there's physical products, whether it be bottles or cars or whatever else, you obviously build a lot of expertise in this area. And now it's easy to say as you move into a more digital world, you say, hang on, these capabilities will not help you. And the classic example is that a normal car has about 150,000 parts that need to come together, and of course, Volkswagen, Daimler, BMW, and the other players, they know how these pieces fit together and they have the manufacturing processes in place. But a Tesla car has about 10,000 parts. and none of them overlap with the 150,000 cells. Yeah, so the typical argument that you see at the moment is that once Tesla hits the market for good, it becomes really big, Ford and all the other players can forget their supply chain because it doesn't help them build the digital car anymore. I don't think that's quite true. Yeah, so I think one of the things that the digital players have to deal with is that they're also entering the physical world where things like structure, weight, location, time, movement matters. In the digital world, we tend to think that nothing costs a dime. Yeah? Amazon, you can sell any book in the world because you don't need to store any of them. Yeah? But you're still talking about cars that have to drive the road, that need refilling, whether it be fuel or whether it be electricity or oxygen or whatever else it might be. But you still have to deal with these physical properties. There's still stuff that needs to be moved, that needs to be manufactured, that needs to be recycled. Yeah? And in this space, obviously the purely physical players have a lot of advantages.
So would you advise a company being active in physical goods, would you advise them to build a digital business as well, or to partner with a company who started a digital business?
So what we see, again, you have to take some examples where they're a little bit more advanced. The example that I think of is finance sector. Finance sector is not really pure physical, but you still have banknotes and money changing place, and you still have banks, Sparkasse, whatever else. And they've been pretty good at realizing that they don't really have the capabilities, or they can't attract the talent that help them enter the digital world. So most banks, especially Deutsche Bank, after the $1 billion of realizing this, they're not trying to do that themselves. So instead, they're partnering up with other companies that help them build the digital solutions, and they play to their own strength, which is, being out there in the sticks in the Eifel and then talking to the local customers. Yeah. So I think, and I don't have the answer for this, but I think what will happen is that the physical companies, they need to play, especially the innovation games, based on their strength, and have a look at how they build some of the capabilities either in-house or grab them from somewhere else and connect them. Yeah, so the entire move, I'm going to stop doing this and I'm going to worry about this instead, it's not going to work for anyone. Yeah, and there are a few models of how organizations can do this. Yeah, so the finance player working with fintech startups is a good example. And they're not trying to build the software themselves. If you've ever had a contact with the Deutsche Bank, with Volksbank, you know what I mean. They're not trying to build this capability themselves. They're teaming up with others who can do them already. So that might be an effective strategy. We'll have to see, because it's not there yet, so that we can find out. Yes, please. Good.
So what I found interesting is you mentioned that there's a sweet spot between like human agency and technology's agency in a way. And what I was thinking is when we were talking about people using tools to design cars, for example, it sounds like it reduces or lowers the barriers to entry for people who are non-expert in engaging in these domains, right?
Yeah.
So I was wondering what's your take on but if you put it around, like these people do not know how these things actually work because the technology takes care of this. I was wondering what is your take on experts and how you can complement experts and their knowledge with digital products, because that's when it becomes really interesting, right?
I think, and that is a challenge for people like us. I think we need to go back and study real big-scale industrial manufacturing. Because I do not think that anyone can just come off the street, design a car, and push BMW out of the market. That's just not how it works. And we've seen it before, yeah? So 10 years ago, people started a disruption wave. Yeah, Uber is putting taxis out of business. Airbnb is taking over the hotels, etc., and so forth. Frankly, I just took a taxi here, staying in a hotel, so all that disruption and displacement hasn't happened. And there's probably a very good reason for this, because if you look a little bit closer, especially at the examples that are famous, like Uber, like Tesla, they're on the verge of breaking down. They don't really live up to the scale of operation, so it's very hard for them to sustain it. Yeah? So try to make it, it's really cool to actually enter the news and have a couple of successful examples, but produce 20 million Beatles, that's a very different challenge. Yeah? So I think for us that means we need to go away from these toy examples and these failing single cases and study how the big heavy stuff works. Yeah? So how CocaCola managed to sell billions of tin cans on this planet. Yeah? So I think that's a very different scale, and I think there's a lot more protection happening there that prevents people like you and I, even if we have the capability to build a Coca-Cola of our own and even sell it, and distribute it and market it and God knows what else we can do. And that's still probably not going to displace it. Yeah? So, but we don't know. Yeah? But all the science so far is that I personally think we haven't seen all that disruption that people have claimed 10 years ago. So it seems to be a more gradual evolution, or if you come to Germany, a very slow evolution. So there's still a lot of paperwork, even though we've had the paperless office for about 50 years now. Yeah? So these things take time. And some of the reason is there's still organizations and institutions and regulations and people involved. So we learned that, for example, when we worked with the finance sector and the fintechs, where you can build a digital bank, but it's not legal to operate. Yeah, the banking law in Germany states that you need to sign 16 pages of documents on paper with a physical signature to be able to get a banking license. So it doesn't matter that I can build an online bank shop and I can handle a transaction via PayPal. I'm not allowed to do it. Unless, of course, I change the law in Germany, yeah? But that's a different ballgame. So it's not as easy as sometimes it's just looking at technology and some of the agency provides. You still have to put it into organizational context, to people context, and then you realize some of the stuff we don't even want to have happen. Yeah? I was listening to a talk on Friday about artificial intelligence for hiring employees. A big company that I don't want to name now, they're using AI, so a piece of software, to make hiring decisions about employees. And the way that it works is that if you're a candidate, you want to work for that company, you upload a YouTube video of yourself, and that video is then being processed by facial recognition software, and out of this they read a whole lot of attributes about yourself. Okay, obviously my descent, so it would find out male, Caucasian, white, so on and so forth, and stuff like this. But they also find out whether or not I'm an introvert or an extrovert, whether or not I'm shy, whether or not I get nervous in public, and all sorts of characteristics that they find out through these algorithms, and then make a hiring decision based on this. And as soon as people caught up with this, they realize that's not okay. And you can't just not hire me because I'm an extrovert or because I'm an introvert. That's just not ethical. Yeah, so there's a whole lot of thorny challenges that only come to the surface now as you try to put some of these things in place. It's not as simple as just building it and they will come. I mean, we've had that fallacy for about 60 years. We learned one thing is we can't just build technology and they won't come. Any other? Yes, please.
Many products are totally into emotions.
Yes.
And instead of the car digitally or with an algorithm, you don't know really if people like the car, if it creates any emotion with the car, or you can drink pizza and you don't know if it actually tastes well.
Actually, that's actually fairly amazing. Most of these pizzas do taste well. I'm led to believe. I haven't tried it. But
Yeah, I will believe so. But is there any algorithm or any technique to overcome this problem?
Well, there are, yeah. So, there are techniques that are called, they started probably around, again 10 years ago, what we call sentiment analysis. Yeah, give you a bit of text and tell you whether you feel positive or negative emotionally about whatever it is you said. But if you look at it very closely, what these algorithms are doing, they look for certain keywords, like I love this, or I hate it, or oh my god, or whatever else, and then they construe this into a very simple score. Positive or negative, green or red, up or down, yeah? So it's fairly flimsy if you look at it in detail, but of course these things do get better, and they already do get better, yeah? So we know from some public cases, there's a US election and other things, you can use some of these programs very well to influence people, and you can read a lot. Yeah, so from 27 clicks on Facebook, I can find out everything about your personality. Yeah, so it is technologically feasible and doable. We don't see it at the moment. Because as I said, we're at the tipping point where we have to ask whether we want to move further on the right-hand side, or whether we want to keep some on the left-hand side, and we need to better understand what happens if we do. And what happens if we do, if our hiring processes are being automated, if predictions are being made based on my emotional state. So there's been research on so-called emotion-aware information systems, emotion-aware computers already, for example, that change this color of your screen based on whether you feel agitated. And it gives you a nice blue background, it's soothing. If you're a little bit too tired, it actually does a peppy red, wakes you up. So these things already exist, but obviously not yet on a great scale. Yeah? So most backgrounds are still white because we have Google as the homepage. Yes, please, hi.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned that you work on in your group is the digitalization of business processes.
Yes.
When you listen to the sound of the theme, it also sounds like a sort of an ongoing thing, right? Business processes tend to get digitalized more and more. At the same time, we also see that in certain branches or markets, there is a premium that is being paid, for example, to still stay engaged with the person.
Yes.
So, can you tell us a little bit about how you look at the role of the human operator or the process participant in the business processes of the future?
It's something that we want to find out. Let's put it this way. So, want to find out what happens if we have more and more. We call them digital agents. So, people, not people, but things that can do stuff in a process. They can fill out a credit card application form. They can sign off on your home loan. Whatever it is that happens in such a process. And increasingly, we have technologies or algorithms that can do this. Yeah. So at the moment, if you look back at what happened in digitalizing processes so far, is what we call digitalizing cowpath. We take a cowpath. You take a normal process and you just convert it, you just map it to the digital world. So it's exactly the same process, just online. Yeah. So a loan application is exactly the same thing. You fill out on paper, you fill out online on the phone, and click a button. So it's not really changing in any way. Yeah. But of course you could. And in some of the instances where we see this, it means that the human actor has to take on a different role. Yeah, so in the example of designers, say video game designers, we notice that the person that is the video game designer is less concerned with creativity and understanding of the product and maybe how people, how the player communities will react to a particular monster looking a particular way and so forth. But he becomes more of a tool coach. Yeah? He has to understand the algorithm that are at his disposal. Yeah? So that's a change in role for the human actor that we see there. The other question that I find interesting there is, at the moment it looks like a lot of the digital agents are designed so they're much human alike. Yeah, like the robots that you see, they're meant to look alike and behave like a human would. Well, they don't need to, right? And there would be limits to that because we're sort of bounding what they could possibly do to something that we can do anyway. Maybe they can do faster or more of it, or they don't get tired. Like a shepherd dog doing the job of a shepherd, and we do a shepherd robot dog doing the same stuff. But why? We could have an algorithm doing much more cleverly or intelligent stuff, doing things very differently from how a human would do it. Yeah, so I like this generative design engine, these algorithms, come up with very different ways of thinking about a chair than we could possibly do. Yeah? So I think that's an interesting one in that we have digital objects taking an agent, an actor role that looks different from what we thought. And by that token, it means that the human who's still there also has to take a different role and work together a lot. Yeah? A lot differently to what we know of. Yeah? So what does it mean for the guy or the lady that does claims processing in a bank? Does she still need to fill out the form? Or what is her job? Yeah? Yes, please.
When you talk about innovation, I think you also have to talk about the people when it affects them in their daily life. Or there's always the rumor that there's a lack of people working in this field. Do you think that it's mandatory for school, maybe in primary school, to have a subject like computer science or maybe general technology to teach people to have a basic understanding, to keep up with the change of the world, and maybe also to make it easier to start working?
So I'm going to leave the world of scientific realm of facts or whatever we think we're facts and give you my personal opinion. Yes. Yeah, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, STEM, education. Yeah, that's a well-known issue in many countries, including Germany, also even in Australia, where it really was a horrible level. And then depending on which country you're in, they're taking more or less active steps. So here we're probably a bit slow, as usually in Scandinavian countries a lot faster. So yes, I do think so. Yeah, so I've only seen snippets of this. I've seen recently someone posted on Twitter that their kid was had their first computer science class in high school, and they showed the textbook that they use. Yeah, and in Germany it's fairly heavily regulated what sort of textbooks you use, these columnists textbooks, and they talk about floppy disks. Yeah? So from the 80s, and you think like, what the hell? This has nothing to do with a modern piece of technology. So I think yes, that is an issue, but it's obviously more systemic and it goes deeper than just telling the teacher to go and teach them computer science or technology, or in fact engineering and math in a different way. So I think it has to be done. Absolutely, most people on the planet would agree. Again, difficult to implement such an innovation if you want that. So, but yes, I think it needs to be done. I do the same thing. You come to my class next week and we do a bit of math exercise. It's horrible. Right? People can't do math anymore. So, but yeah, same stuff. Will, please.
So my question is a bit by some of the hints that you made earlier. So I returned from Japan in the weekend, and in Japan, like, people are unable to do anything unless there is a defined process, and they are very good at Kaizen, at like constantly trying to improve something without changing it a lot. So now you move from Australia to Germany, so you've seen some parts of the world. Which country in the world would be best equipped to get into this transition? And what are perhaps things that Germany could do to be more leading in that respect?
Well, we do get to travel a bit, agree. So a country that I was very impressed with was Estonia. So Estonia is an entirely digitalized government. Every government service you can do online, except for one, by the way. Marriage license, you have to show up with your partner, get married at least once. You can't get divorced online, but you have to marry in person. So that's the only service by design they don't digitalize. So everything else is digitalized, and they don't have a passport anymore. You have a digital citizen ID, and it works wonderfully. If you look at their education sector, if you look at universities, they're doing very, very well in this regard. They have a lot of very interesting tech startups that are all doing incredibly well. But then again, it's an entirely small country. So I sometimes think, especially if you compare Australia and Germany, it is a matter of scale, and it is a matter of how old such a country is. Australia is a very young country, 20 million people. It's sort of like the rugby beat, a place that's bigger than Europe. And that's a lot harder to do it here, I think, because Germany is such an old country, and so historically grown. There's cultural issues at hand. So I think some of the core reasons why some of these things progress faster or slower have nothing to do with technology, are entirely vested in social phenomena, culture, history, experience, regulations. If you think about data privacy laws in Germany versus in other countries, so they have nothing to do with technology. And this is why the social technical dimension is so interesting.
Because I think many of your examples, in a way, originate from the US, right?
And
does the gap become bigger and bigger, or?
No, it does not. No, I don't think so. But this is a good example because here, even in innovation, physical properties matter. So there's a good reason why Silicon Valley has been leading the world in digital innovation, because they're all co-located. I mean, you literally have to go there, and it gives you a very different culture, atmosphere, but also so you learn a lot more. People on the streets are also probably working in technology, so they're literally all in one place. And it has some very interesting sort of anecdotes on the side. It also means that if you're a tech entrepreneur, but you're not in Silicon Valley, people either think that can't be good, because otherwise you'd be in Silicon Valley. So there's this sort of perceptual dimensions to that as well. I don't think the schism is widening. I think it's narrowing, because that's these sort of ecosystem properties other countries have realized. So Singapore, for example, have been realizing this for over a decade. They've been trying to build the Asian version of the Silicon Valley very successfully over there. And in Germany as well, if you look at Berlin, or even here Cologne, Frankfurt is one of the biggest technology startup ecosystems on the planet. So it's not anymore that everything digital comes out of Silicon Valley. And I think in the future, like so many things, we'll have to turn to Asia, and see what happens on that side of the planet, because they have different regulative contexts. So in terms of privacy laws, for example, individual rights, some of the stuff that happened progress, if you want. We'll cut that out of the film later, but you know what I mean. Like, there's different sort of environmental factors, and they give you a different platform to do some of these things.
Thanks.
Yes, please.
I'm keen to know how you deal with uncertainty, because I kind of get the feeling that businesses are at a moment where they're very concerned about the future, because they are very afraid of disruption. Absolutely. They are quite concerned about technology is going to bring. Meanwhile, they need to make a business decision on what they're going to be investing in, and because money is obviously tense, especially like going into a recession, what do you suggest what you should do.
So there's two aspects of this. Number one is the research challenge, and that's a tricky one because if I want to study, like if people like when we go out in the field and we study how these things, how they really occur, we always looking back, right? So we have to wait for someone to be disrupted to see what actually happened there, right? So that's a challenge for that type of work, to go out there and study how organizations deal with it. We literally have to sit back and wait and relax and see them go on the miserly path if you want. The other way is, of course, is to help teach the organizations how to embrace and deal with uncertainty. And there are especially management approaches and techniques and processes to deal with this. Yeah, and there's a variety of them. So if we, in our executive course, I skip all the theory, but we talk a lot about how do you set up a team so they can go around and experiment, try, fail fast, learn, do it again, and sort of deal with an uncertain environment where basically, in a nutshell, the best you can do is you have to commit to something, you have to try, build it, fail, learn very fast, and be ready to stop and do something else instead. Which is not a way of dealing with innovations or a process that organizations usually do. Once you have a budget and you're going to do this project, you're going to do it, right? Until the money runs out usually, but you're definitely going to do it, and don't call it a failure. That's absolute no-go. So instead, what you have to do is you have to act fast, fail fast, and learn fast, which is a hard thing to do by itself, but absolutely doable. Yeah? So in a way, scientists, I'm not saying we're very good at this, but we fail a lot. Yeah? So we try to learn from that. I shouldn't say we do, but we try. So some of these principles, they help organizations as well. Yeah? So if you think about it, scientists experiments, but most organizations do not. And maybe they should. Yeah? Okay, I think I kept you off the drinks a long time in a very hot room. I do thank you for coming. Please join me outside so we can discuss some of this more offline. Thank you very much.